Every job that you have is a big job. When I started working with Bell Canada, I was a typist. And so whenever anyone would ask me what I did with Bell, I would jokingly say, oh, I have a big job at the Bell. Years later, when I became a VP, I still said, I have a big job at the Bell. If the job you're doing is worth your time and your talent and your energy, it is a big job. You are never just anyone. How many times have you called and said, oh, hi, it's just me, or I just had an idea, I was just thinking? If you're volunteering, how many times have you said, oh, I'm just a volunteer? I heard someone say that years ago, and I swore I would try to find a way to remove the word just from everyone's vocabulary. So try to not use that word when you're describing yourself. Pick up on it when your family members, if your child calls you at work and says, oh, hi, Mom, it's just me. No, it's not just you. It's a big job. I have learned that ego isolates you. Flattery, I will suggest to you, is like chewing gum. You should enjoy it briefly, but don't swallow it. I learned the hard way, and I believe I can speak about this because I learned it the hard way. Having a job is not the same thing as having a life. When I was writing my first book, a colleague of mine at Bell said, hey, Carol Ann, I hear you're writing a book. What's it about? And I said, well, I haven't really decided yet if it's going to be about my life or my career. And without missing a beat, he said, I think in your case, it's one and the same. Ouch. My Bell Canada career was one that I absolutely loved. There were lots of trying times. I went through the 80s and early 90s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, where women were trying to climb the corporate ladder. I wanted to be a VP in the non-traditional side of a company. I wanted to run Bell Canada's installation and repair force. If you live in either the 905 or the 416 area code, I was your VP back in the late 80s and early 90s. I loved my job, and I'm afraid I allowed myself to be identified by that job. And it's something today, for example, when I have the opportunity to speak to university students, I try to really hammer that home because they're just about to get out there. We all work hard. We work very hard. We have very demanding careers, but it's important to have a life as well. One of the most powerful lessons that I learned during my career was that your honesty reflects your level of intelligence. There is never anything wrong with saying, I didn't understand that, or I need your help, or I need a break from this particular discussion for a moment. When I was trying to learn the installation job, I had the opportunity to go into our installation department kind of at the middle level. And behind my back, people were making fun of me. I'm a high school graduate from rural Nova Scotia, a community of about 600 people. Are there any Maritimers here? I know there are quite a few of us. Anybody know where Wilmot, Nova Scotia is? Okay, that's where I'm from. And behind my back, they were calling me the company's country bumpkin. And then they made the case that if Toronto is going to move a woman into installation, pick somebody from Toronto, not somebody from the East Coast, for heaven's sake. And I had been in North Bay, Kingston, Ottawa, Toronto. It sounded like I'm announcing a train schedule. I had been in all those small towns. So it was not an easy challenge. But I believe that the small town girl in me that allowed me to be honest and say, oh, help me with that. I have no idea what you're talking about. The minute you ask someone to help you, they're only too happy to do that. People want to help you learn your job so you can help them do their job. And do you know that years later, when I came back as the vice president for that same group, there was a lot of gossip that day. You can imagine the day my promotion was announced. And so these guys in Scarborough that had been on my middle-level team were all being called, and the question was, have you heard that Carol Ann Cole is our new VP? What can you tell us about her? And they said, we're not surprised. We taught her everything she knows. I was okay with that. In fact, they did teach me a lot of what I knew. I learned after I left Bell that credentials and money speaks many different languages. You are not identified by the diploma on your wall. You are identified by the degree to which you can be honest enough to reflect your intelligence when you're talking to people. I had the opportunity to speak at Queen's University one year, and it was really an eye-opener for a number of us. I was on a panel. There were 4 of us, and I'm not quite sure how they came up with the particular group, but 3 women were hugely financially successful oil executives, and me. So they spoke before me, and they're talking not about earning $1 million, but how many millions of dollars you can make. And along comes the country bumpkin talking about it's not about the money. But you know, the first comment to the panel was a young gal who said, I want to be a teacher. And I was afraid that I was already a failure when I heard about how many millions of dollars I should be wanting to make. So never judge anyone by the amount of money that they're making. I have learned to be nice twice. Messing up happens. We all make a mistake. You never know the brick that someone beside you is carrying on their back the day that they upset you. Give everybody a second chance. Maybe just a second chance. We don't all get a third chance, but everybody deserves a second chance. When you need to say, I'm sorry, say it once, mean it, and move on. Now, ladies, men are better at this than I am. When I was at Bell, if one of the guys did something wrong and he needed to apologize to me, he'd say, oh, sorry about that, Carol Ann, and he would never think about it again. Not me. If I upset someone, I'd apologize, and probably the next time I'd see them, I'd say, oh, Mona, I'm still feeling so badly about that. I might even mention it a third time. Don't do that. You devalue yourself in the apology. Say it, mean it, move on. How many of you journal? How many of you keep a journal? I have found journaling very, very powerful. It's obviously how I came up with the information to write my memoir in the beginning, and certainly my book subsequently. But for me, more powerful than that, it allowed me to get rid of baggage or garbage. For example, when I was writing my 3rd book, I went through all of my journals. I decided that, you know, maybe my son didn't really need to hear about maybe my boyfriends or... I should stop there and tell you, by the way, that a very less than successful part of my life was that I was married at 21, I was a mother at 23, and I was divorced at 25. So I had a few boyfriends after that along the way. Obviously, I've only been divorced for 39 years. I was telling my friend Shauna earlier, I don't want to rush into anything. So you know, it's only been 39 years. I'm trying to be very careful about that. But for me, when I went through the journals the 2nd and 3rd time, things that were really bothering me, when you read it, it's kind of not that big an issue. So you can kind of let it go when you see your words in paper. I have learned to carry the pride of my hometown with me wherever I go. When my peers at Bell first started to call me a country bumpkin, you know, I was young enough and inexperienced enough and perhaps naive enough that I was embarrassed by that. But it didn't take long before I would say, and guess where I'm from, because I became very proud of that. One of the things I wanted to do after I left my Bell career was to move home to Nova Scotia, and I got to do that, and I try to get back there every year if I can for a couple of months. I walked away from my Bell career. When I went back to work, I took 6 months off, and Mom had 4 daughters, and she had asked us to allow her to die at home, and we were happy to do that. And I had sisters at the time living in Calgary, Edmonton, and Honolulu. So guess, by the way, which sister I visited most often. I lived in Toronto, so it was literally all the way around more convenient for Mom to live with me. So when I went back to work, I knew from the second I went back, that's not where I wanted to be. I didn't know where I wanted to be or what I wanted to do, but I knew it wasn't climbing that corporate ladder. So after 16 months back at my big job, I left Bell. I moved home to the East Coast. I started to work on my bucket list. And I worried that if cancer ever came back, God forbid, I did not want to still be at the office. And in retrospect, thank goodness I did that. I have learned to look down on no one. Opportunity wears many faces. When my son and I were first on our own, he was a couple years old, I had one goal: to one day own my own washer and dryer. We were lugging that garbage and laundry in the green garbage bag. He loved it. He had got to bring his own garbage bag down the street. That was my goal. When I'm checking out of a hotel now, I remind myself that possibly the housekeeping staff is saving for their first washer and dryer. The person who picks up my garbage at the end of the street. The person who pours my Tim's coffee. There are so many people out there working every bit as hard as I am. I try to judge no one. I have learned that success comes one day at a time. Very often we look around and we think, surely success is coming faster to everyone but us. That's not necessarily what's happening.